Is 2023 the year of psychedelic legalization? Let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show.
Well, happy Monday. No, happy Tuesday. Losing the days there. Happy Tuesday there. I'm Brian Nichols here on the Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you live from our Stratus IP studios here in lovely Eastern Indiana. Don't let cyber attacks or outdated business technology put your company at risk. Learn more at briannicholsshow.com/Stratus IP. So last year, we talked about psychedelics, and we had a couple of episodes where we've talked about the improvements in using them as therapeutics, but also the means that they've been used to help those traditionally who have not had their issues that they've been dealing with medically dealt with. And when you're looking specifically at our friends in the veteran community, we've seen a lot of issues there, and psychedelics being a really great tool to help really serve as some types of means of relief. And to join us today, talk about the legalization aspect of things, joining us from the Libertas Institute, Amy Pomeroy. Amy, thanks for joining us here on the Brian Nichols Show.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, Amy. Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to today's conversation. And yes, we are talking about the point where we are right now. Psychedelics have improved in the narrative, right? The narrative standpoint. And this has been the hardest part. We've talked about this on the show many a time with past guests, is getting past the narratives of yesteryear and talk about what the advancements in not just the technology, but also in the ability to talk about psychedelics has gotten us to where we are to today. But I'm putting the cart before the horse. Amy, first, do us a favor, introduce yourself to the Brian Nichols Show audience, and also why we're going to be talking about psychedelic legalization today.
Yeah, so my name is Amy Pomeroy. I work for the Libertas Institute here in Utah. I'm the director of policy. I work mostly on criminal justice reform, and one of our most pressing, most exciting criminal justice reforms is we are planning to bring some legislation this session to Utah, which would legalize psilocybin for medical uses.
So talk to us about the stuff I'm sure you're facing from some challenges, right? And we talked about this in the past, but what are you currently experiencing, the main challenges that you're facing legally, but also societally?
So like you mentioned, I mean, there is a lot of baggage. When you say the word psychedelics, people probably picture, some tie-dye and I don't know, maybe some crazy 60s behavior. But even though drugs escaped the lab back in the 60s, there's really a lot of strong science showing that psychedelics, especially psilocybin, work really well for legitimate medical purposes. Johns Hopkins has done some great research showing how it helps people with depression and with end-of-life anxiety. And, they're taking 1 or 2 doses of psilocybin, and they're finding that they're getting relief that lasts months, potentially indefinitely, right? And this is so much different than the anti-anxiety medications, the SSRIs that are currently on the market that you take every day. You generally see diminishing returns after time. For a lot of people, they're never effective in the first place. So this could really be a game changer for a lot of people who are suffering.
Talk to us about what you're seeing, I guess, is some of the main pro psychedelics. I know, again, using that term, but the pro psychedelic arguments that you could see. Is there anything that really has come out recently that's leading more in the favor?
I think one thing that's helping is the slow progression. It's becoming more and more normalized. There have been a number of books and articles. How to Change Your Mind is a great book. It recently became a Netflix documentary, and it's really bringing that awareness to the current state of science that's helping change minds. That, and we've seen a lot of cities decriminalize psilocybin and other psychedelics. And then in 2020, Oregon legalized psilocybin as well as other drugs. And then just a couple months ago in Colorado, there was a ballot measure legalizing psilocybin as well as a couple other psychedelics. And so you're really seeing the narrative become more mainstream. And a lot of people who maybe would have instantly shut it out are realizing, hey, the narrative I know about drugs doesn't necessarily apply to psilocybin. There's a lot more nuance there, right? Like heroin is not the same as meth, is not the same as LSD, is not the same as psilocybin, right? We can't lump them all together.
What are some common questions that you often get asked? Because I mean, great, this is not necessarily a weird topic, but it's just a topic that has not been allowed, it feels like, for so many years. So I'm sure a lot of folks have some questions for you. So what are some of the top questions you could ask, Amy?
I'd say one of the things I hear most is, are psychedelics safe? Is psilocybin safe? And the research here is really interesting because you almost can't eat enough psilocybin to overdose. They've never had a human report a death from a psilocybin overdose. And when they've tested it on animals, it takes a very large amount to kill a rat or a mouse. And if you translate that into human terms, basically you'd have to go and eat several pounds of dried psilocybin mushrooms to overdose. And if you've ever eaten a dry mushroom, a shiitake or anything, like, you're not going to want to eat 3 pounds of that. You would have to try very hard to overdose. So it's really safe in terms of toxicity and also in terms of mental health. In the 60s, there were kind of these stories of, you're going to lose your mind. And that's pretty much all been debunked, right? It's not going to make you go crazy. It's not going to kill you. It's one of the safest psychoactive substances we have.
And you were talking about earlier some of the means by using psychedelics to help deal with depression, anxiety, a lot of our mental health issues. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. Maybe I'd like to start by telling an anecdote about a man I met in my work for psilocybin. Sure. His name's Eric. He was a veteran. He served in Afghanistan. He served in Iraq. He was a pilot. And after doing 5 tours, he was forced to resign because of a medical issue. He had an inner ear issue. He couldn't fly anymore. And so after that, he just kind of felt adrift. Plus, he had all this, trauma from being in the military for so many years. And he was diagnosed with PTSD. He was diagnosed with depression. His family just really noticed a change in him, that he wasn't the same happy, outgoing person he'd always been. He went to a doctor who gave him an SSRI. He tried it, and he really just noticed those diminishing returns, that it wasn't working for him. He kind of was getting desperate, and he decided that he needed to grow some psilocybin and give that a try. And he did. And it changed his whole perspective. He hasn't been depressed since. He's overcome his PTSD. He doesn't have to be on SSRIs anymore. Like, it was really pretty life-changing for him in just a few doses. And when you consider the rates of suicide among our vets, it's 37 per 100,000. I mean, that's well above what it is for the rest of the population. It's kind of, I think it's just unconscionable that we're not making this available to people when we know there's such a problem.
So, excuse me, we were talking about earlier the more acceptance from the mainstream. What do you think is leading to that? Is it more that we're talking about the use of psychedelics openly, or people are seeing friends they know seeing the benefit firsthand and now hearing about it versus only seeing that one narrative?
I think there's 2 things there, right? Like, there's the science to back it up. There's been a lot more funding for science regarding this. It's become much more mainstream. With psilocybin, they're on phase 3 trials of psilocybin. So, I mean, it's getting there. It's becoming, like I said, more mainstream. And then the other part is the anecdotes, right? This used to be something that was very, very hush hush. And now people are more willing to talk about it and share their experiences. Regardless of it being illegal, lots of people are using it, and chances are you probably know somebody who has tried psilocybin. And so I think that's changing a lot of minds when you see that, hey, here's someone, I just talked to a real human and they've used psilocybin, and you know what? They just seem like a normal human being. They're not off their rocker. Everything's fine. And maybe they're even better than they used to be.
Ask some of our friends. We've done some candidate trainings for different state and county parties for different political organizations here. And I've said, if you want to talk to folks and relate to them like a normal person, you got to act like a normal person, believe it or not. Talk to us about what you're seeing as some of the big roadblocks still in the way in order to get this legalization process moving.
Honestly, in Utah, things are going really well. We've got a sponsor for our bill.
All right.
And I was really surprised because I've reached out to a lot of the law enforcement agencies and things, and I was expecting to have to do some pretty hard selling. And for the most part, what I'm hearing is, as long as this is for medical uses and there's reasonable guardrails around it, we don't want to get in between patients and their doctors. And so I think our biggest roadblock right now is maybe ignorance, right? There is a segment of the population who just hasn't heard about this. It's not on their radar, and it can take it takes some energy to educate, but I think we're making strides in that.
Now, you talked about the medical side of things. What about the recreational side of things? 'Cause I'm sure that there will inevitably be that slippery slope argument, right? You look at medical cannabis, medical marijuana, that's turned into recreational marijuana across the country. So the logic would state, well, stand to reason at least, that maybe that is the next logical progression here.
I mean, it's a valid point because some states that have legalized medical cannabis have then gone to recreational cannabis. Here in Utah, we just have medical cannabis, and our program has actually been pretty successful at putting guardrails around that, so we can still tell what's legal and what's illegal. And we're actually building on that successful framework for psilocybin, right? We're going to follow a lot of the same processes that have been used with cannabis. And so we don't have to recreate the wheel. It's not going to be super expensive for taxpayers to recreate this whole framework. And we're going to be able to provide this to people medically and safely. And frankly, when you talk about recreational use, that is happening already, and it's happening widely. And that's what's sad to me is that's where the danger comes from. Before I came to Libertas, I was a prosecutor, and I had one case where someone wanted to use psilocybin responsibly, and they invited their friend to come watch over them, and he ended up, kind of trying to sexually assault her while he was, under the influence, and she didn't know what to do. She was a professional with no training, or she wasn't a professional. She had no training. And so by medicalizing this, people who want to use it can use it in a responsible way. Whereas right now they're getting stuff on the black market. They don't know what's in it. They don't know how strong it is. They don't know if it's pure, and they don't have adequate supervision. And so that's really making it illegal is what's causing problems and danger.
Well, and this is the argument we hear all the time, right? For why the war on drugs has consistently failed. So it just stands to reason as well that it will continue to fail in this area as well. So I guess to those detractors, to those naysayers of what seems like the inevitable, talk to us, I guess, in terms of what are their main concerns? What are they bringing up to you saying, Amy, but think of X, Y, Z?
I mean, there's always to think of the children, right? We don't want them falling into the
think of the children, Amy. Come on.
Do you hate children and puppy dogs and rainbows? No. So our bill is only for people who are 21 and older, and we've got a pretty strict inventory control system. It has to be recommended by a physician or someone with prescribing authority. It has to be used in an office with a trained therapist. So really the possibility of diversion is just not there. And I also think you have the added benefit of, when it becomes more mainstream medically, you're going to increase people's ability to talk about this openly and educate people, including children, about, hey, this is a useful medicine. You don't want to use it because your brain is still growing. And it really opens up a possibility for open and honest dialogue that doesn't exist right now.
Away from just like the psychedelic conversation in general, but I mean, how damaging really has it been for generations of the stigmas that we put around certain very useful drugs that are not your pharmaceutical drugs, so they don't have the folks in the fancy white lab coats giving their trademark seal of approval, but rather it might be the guy with the like the shawl rug in the big beard, and the hippie glasses that gives you marijuana, and that was like I think that right there has been something that we've had to face, and I say we just like as a society, right? Like this is. There's so much that we have missed out on. And I mean, we go through every commercial for every pharmaceutical drug that's out there, and the list of side effects is enough to make, anybody tuck tail and run. And yet when you look at like marijuana, the mentality that some folks have when it regards marijuana, they will look at marijuana as if it is more dangerous than like Oxycontin or name your opioid that you have there that's brought in and paid for by big pharma. So I guess it is something when you look at the generations of folks who, how much pain and suffering could we have avoided, I guess is my point. If we had had a more rational, logical, reasonable conversation, particularly about issues and drugs like what we're talking about here today with psychedelics, psilocybin, and so forth.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there, Brian. I think the first thing is our scheduling system, the federal drug scheduling system, is not based on science, right? And I think we implicitly just trust that, oh, you said it's a Schedule 1 drug and it has possibilities of being dangerous and addictive and it has no medical use. We're just going to trust that because who has time to delve into that, right?
Yep.
But I think
experts.
Yeah, right. And I think they've proven again and again that they're not worthy of that trust, because really the science does not match the scheduling. And when you talk about how many people have, suffered unnecessarily, we had science in the 50s and 60s. There were literally like over 1,000 papers published in those decades on psychedelics, and they were getting great results. And then we just shut that down. And so we have had decades of people suffering who could have been, living more healthy, productive lives. Here in Utah, we have some of the highest suicide rates in the nation. We have like 11% of Utahns report a major depressive episode. The national suicide rate is 14 per 100,000. And here in Utah, it's 21 per 100,000. And so we're not just talking quality of life. We're talking about whether someone has a life at all. And to me, it's just so sad to think about all those people who could still be alive if they, had access to this. I've talked to people who credit psilocybin with saving their life. And it makes me so sad that that's only been available to people who have sought out this underground knowledge and have had to get it illegally or grow it themselves and then use it without supervision. And it's really scary. And how many people, aren't brave enough or knowledgeable to do that? And it's costing lives, and it's costing quality of life for a lot of people.
Well, I guess this is why we're doing what we're doing here at the Brian Nichols Show, and frankly, what you're doing, Amy, over at the Libertas Institute, and trying to help leave folks, educated, enlightened, and informed, because there's so much, and we talk about when we're going out and talking to your average person, there's so much that your average person is having to deal with, right, in their day-to-day. So it's on us to be able to make this stuff easy to understand. So what you're doing and being able to not only raise this up politically and do so through the legislative process, what you're doing in Utah right now, but across the board, having the conversation and resetting the narrative, helping folks understand, that the narratives that we've been passed down for generation after generation, not only are they wrong, many times they were purposefully put in place to divert us from the real alternatives that are out there. And that's maybe to put some dollars in the pockets of big pharma. But that's, I think, a conversation for a different episode, Amy. With that being said, we are getting close to the end of the episode. So, of course, I want to make sure I give you the chance to leave us with some final thoughts. And, of course, where folks can go ahead and follow you and continue the conversation if they want to learn more.
Oh, well, you can follow me on Facebook. You can follow me on, not Instagram, on Twitter. And if I could just leave you with a few parting words. Psilocybin is revolutionary in that it's not a Band-Aid, right? It's not numbing your pain. It's not masking it. It's not putting a Band-Aid on a giant wound. It's actually changing the structure of your brain. It's making it more plastic so you can think through the underlying causes of your anxiety or your depression, and you can actually resolve it in a healthy way and create new thought patterns. And to me, that is so inspiring that we have a totally new way to deal with this that gets at the root of it. And I just hope that we can make this available to as many people as possible.
Perfect. Well, we'll do this. We'll go ahead and include the links for anywhere that folks can go ahead and find you, the Libertas Institute, but also to keep in touch so they can see what's going on in the show notes. All you got to do, folks, is click the artwork in your podcast catcher. If you're joining us here on the audio version of the show, which I know 95% of you are, all you got to do is click that artwork and it'll bring you over to briannicholsshow.com, where you can find today's episode, the entire transcript of today's episode, plus you can find all 651 other episodes of the program. And with that being said, please go ahead and follow yours truly on Twitter and on Facebook, B Nichols Liberty. Also, by the way, folks, really excited. We have a brand new ebook that's coming out here this Friday, How to Win Your Local Election. If you want to go ahead and get this brand new ebook, well, make sure you go ahead and email me, brian@briannicholsshow.com. Between now and then, I will add you to the list, or you can go ahead. We're going to have that link go live on Friday. Either way, this book is going to be a great resource for candidates out there who are either running for local office, they're running for re-election for local office, or they're thinking about it. Because at the end of the day, running for local office, a lot of the folks out there, they're average people just like us, who are trying to say, hey, I want to make a difference in the world, but I don't know what to do. How do I start out doing this whole politics thing? How do I do fundraising and build a campaign team? All that and more we're going to discuss. And also that will coincide with our candidate school, which we're going to be hosting over on our Patreon part of Brian Nichols Consulting. So guys, if you want to go ahead and join our candidate school, head over to briannicholsshow.com/candidate school. Link will be at the top of the homepage there. Otherwise, that's all I have for you guys today. Do me a favor, by the way, folks, if you have not hit the subscribe button here on YouTube, Rumble, or on Odyssey, where we have our video version of the show, please do so. And also hit that little notification bell so you don't miss a single time we go live. But with that being said, it's Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Amy Pomeroy. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.